Hello and welcome to Atypical, the podcast where, well, normally I would say the podcast where we discuss things from a more atypical point of view. Unfortunately, this is being recorded in post-production and we had a few gremlins in the audio processing and recording through our last couple of episodes. So I've had to put this together from saved recordings of several conversations I had with my co-hosts over the last week or so. It is a little bit jarring and I apologise for that profusely. During this episode, we quickly cover an update from our doctor overseas on the vaccine safety report. We will talk about IDAHOBIT with Marianne and dyslexia with Joey. Both the mysterious voice and Kim sends their apologies, but they are hoping to join us in the next episode. Until then, I hope you enjoy the conversations I was able to have this week on those topics. So first of all, we've had a message from a correspondent in America talking about vaccine safety. He's made reference to a study published recently in The Lancet, and I will include a link to that in the show notes, which talks about the safety of the mRNA vaccines. In the UK, these are known as the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. And the report looks at those that were administered in the initial 6 months of the US COVID-19 vaccination program. Now, it analyses reports that were given to the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, which is a passive system used in the US, as well as something called vSafe, which is a new system developed, which is more active. Now, a total of 298 million doses of an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine were administered in that first 6 months of the US program, and the study found that most reported adverse events were mild and short. It's interesting to note that reactions and health impacts were reported more frequently in female than in male recipients, and further that most people under 65 were more likely to report an adverse event than people over 65. And the report goes on to mention that serious adverse events, where they include myocarditis, were identified, but were incredibly rare. In fact, it is the researchers' review and analysis of death reports where they found no unusual patterns to the cause of death. And although this is not a controlled or randomised trial, and therefore attributing cause and effect is not easy, it should be noted that there have been over 11 billion vaccine doses across the globe, and in highly vaccinated countries such as the UK, the excess death from all causes are currently lower than expected. So, whilst safety monitoring does continue, the virus is here to stay, and we would highly recommend, if you are able to get a vaccine and you have not yet done so, pop onto the NHS website and book yourself a jab, because they do save lives. They are the most effective way to prevent a serious outcome. We will, of course, at some point cover the Andrew Wakefield and MMR scandal of the 90s. And I know a lot of people remember that as being a fear creation point for vaccines. I will get someone far more intelligent than me on to help explain that in a later episode. And now to talk about IDAHOBIT and Dementia Awareness Week, I'm joined by regular co-host Marianne.
Hello.
So let's kick off first of all with the news. I feel like we need to have some kind of jingle here.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll cut something in edits. So if I do, here it is. The news. I didn't hear a jingle, I don't know about you. Anyway, I think first of all, one of the things I wanted to just sort of quickly mention on is that we're recording this on Thursday, and Tuesday was IDAHOBIT Day, which is the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia.
Yep, so that's quite an important thing, I guess, because, you know, we're against any sort of discrimination. There are a lot of people out there that like starting fights about, oh, what is a woman, and that sort of thing. And it's like, I've seen a lot of that recently, and it's wow, you're so edgy, congratulations, you're so original. It's like someone commenting bacon on a vegan post or something. It's like a joke that's been done before. Things have been done before, and there's just so much. And I'm sure our friends that are LGBT plus, they're absolutely fed up of it, as are people that are not in that.
I have to admit, I'm somewhat fed up with it, and when I see it affecting sort of friends and people I care about, it's very upsetting. I mean, I know this day's been around since I think 2004, and have been designed to sort of draw attention to, I guess, the violence and discrimination you've just been outlining that's sort of experienced by lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex people, and indeed, I suppose, others of a sort of more diverse sexual or gender identity expression characteristics.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, people's orientations, who they want to marry or whatever, is none of anybody else's business. What two consenting adults would like whether two consenting adults want to go on a date with each other and both of them are men or both of them are women, or one of them used to be a man and then turned into it. It doesn't really affect anything on the grand scheme of things. Just let people be. I mean, nobody's getting hurt. And so
so this is the thing is that I discovered, I said discovered, I knew this for some years, but I rediscovered that the reason why they chose May 17th, so a few days ago now, is because in 1990, so really not that long ago, the World Health Organization declassified homosexuality as a mental disorder. So that's within my lifetime.
Glad that it's happened, but it's a shame that it took so long.
I mean, there's I think 37 countries in the world where it's totally and utterly illegal to have any kind of same-sex relationship, which is a scary number, really. Hi, it's Simon in post-production here. The numbers which I quoted there are actually out of date, and so the correct numbers are that there are 71 countries or jurisdictions that criminalise private consensual same-sex sexual activity. Now, the majority of these, they explicitly criminalise sex between men via sodomy, buggery and unnatural offences laws, and worryingly, almost half of these are part of the Commonwealth. There are further 43 jurisdictions that criminalise private sexual activity between women, using laws against lesbianism, sexual relations with a person of same sex, and gross indecency. And even in those jurisdictions that do not explicitly criminalise women, lesbians and bisexual women, they are often subject to arrest or threat of arrest. There are 15 places which criminalise gender identity and expression by transgender people, using often so-called cross-dressing, impersonation and disguise laws. And indeed, in many more countries, transgender people are targeted by a range of laws that criminalise same-sex activity, even vagrancy, sometimes hooliganism. But more scarily, there are 11 jurisdictions in which the death penalty is imposed, or is the possibility, for private consensual same-sex activity. And at least 6 of these countries have used the death penalty in recent years, and which is Iran, northern Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Somalia and Yemen. And the death penalty does remain a legal possibility in Afghanistan, Brunei, Mauritania, Pakistan, Qatar and the UAE.
Yeah, it really is. And it's just to be a person that is dating someone or married to someone of same gender, you can't be free to go on holiday anywhere you like, or, cultural conversations. Like if someone moves from a place where that attitude is existent and they move into the UK and then they sort of say what their cult view is, that can cause a lot of friction between, people of countries where it's not allowed, the people who are people that identify as G, B, or T, or plus. So it's really not ideal at all.
Absolutely. I think it's come somewhat germane that, this year's theme for IDAHOBIT is, let me see if I get this right, it's Our Bodies, Our Lives, Our Rights. And I think that's really, very much in everyone's thinking at the moment with, like you say, some of the terrible press that's going on around some of the changes to, for example, women's rights in America and to do with trans rights, especially in this country and elsewhere. LGBT rights are fundamental human rights. And I think we should all be, championing at the bits to make sure that everyone
Mm.
is free to express who they are and love who they love without any fear of violence or discrimination.
Yeah,
It's one of those
it
things that
makes
the
yeah.
strongest and safest and probably the most economically stable societies are those in where everyone can live freely and without that fear of violence or anything, and they can all take part in society.
Yeah, it just makes me feel a bit sick, and it makes me want to cry whenever I see those sort of stories about someone being, beaten up on the bus, or, for being different to someone else, and someone just being so hateful that they would use that much violence against someone just because of their orientation. Really makes me feel a bit sick. Even if I'm a person who is sort of outwardly female and I date males, I mean, looking at two females dating being attacked just because they happen to be dating each other, it just makes me feel really sick. And that sort of thing. So, and there's like, even with the trans community, and lots of backlash about just hateful people. And I saw this YouTuber making a good point where things are very acceptable unless it's to do with trans people. Suddenly, some people become hateful. Like, for example, when people are getting surgeries that are
Mm.
like gender affirming, people go, "Oh, why did they do that? That's a child or something." When actually, it might maybe an 18-year-old or something. Whereas if it was a straight cis person having a chest reduction because they had a chest that was too big and it was making them uncomfortable, people don't really bat an eye. Or famous people getting nose jobs at age 14 where they cut up their face, slice off bone stuff just for the name of looking nicer, or theoretically nicer. Things only become an issue
Mm.
when they're trans related when it comes to trans people. So that same issue nobody might bat an eyelid until it's trans, because it seems like people fear what they don't know. Like, there's a lot of uproar about the puberty blocker thing. And when I sort of looked into that a little bit more, those are even given to people who are cisgender when they have puberty too early. And apparently they're even
Yes.
reversible. So what's the big
And I think
uproar?
it for me it comes down to this sort of weird policing and control of other people's bodies,
Yeah.
and
Because, people go through this with doctors, with their parents and stuff. It's not like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go through this phase. And I think people that are sort of homophobic, transphobic, they haven't really educated themselves about the actual people that go through it. They just guess, and then they rely on, uproar of,
also, I mean,
um,
what the hell has it got to do with them?
yeah.
How somebody lives their life?
Yeah, when that person might be 1,000 miles away considering a surgery, but they're going to wait until they're a certain age because they want to be sure or whatever. What's it got to do with them? Exactly. And
Exactly.
what's it got to do with some person, a random person sitting on a bus? What's it got to do with them whether the person sitting next to them is dating a boy or a girl, or an intersex or a non binary? I mean, does it really affect anyone? And I've even seen, like, in toilets, I was
Hmm.
in the John Lewis and I saw this lady. She was standing outside, really worried looking, and her husband was calling her, and he said, "Why are you just standing there? What are you doing?" She said, "I saw a man in a dress. I'm waiting for that man in a dress to come out." And I thought, goodness me, I hope she's not talking about a trans person gone in for a wee, because there's all that sort of uproar with the toilet. But these
Well,
poor people are trying to just go to the toilet like a bodily function. So it's none of the person's business really to be standing outside waiting just to check.
absolutely. I mean, and I think unfortunately some of this terrible sort of rhetoric sort of gets into things. I don't know if you saw there was that person in Marks and Spencers.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Johnson.
That was pretty horrible, because it was basically a lady who well, she was going to use the disabled bathroom because she had a hidden disability, and the staff member actually told her not to because she's not disabled. And now that
What?
is just like, yeah, that screams alarm bells to all of us, because you don't know. Nobody can know by looking at someone whether they have a disability. There are all
Hmm.
sorts of disabilities that exist. Somebody could have a colostomy bag where they need to change that, and then they need to wash their hands, and then all that sort of stuff has to be done in private. Or someone could have, difficulty getting up off their seat and might need the railing that toilet offers. Or someone could have, cerebral palsy and have an arm that is not as functional as the other arm. There's so
Mm,
many
yes.
different things. Or someone could even have a temporary injury like a broken leg and might need to, use their crutches to go into, disabled toilet. And it's not for anybody else to say that, because, it's obviously there for people who need it, but who is the judge of that? Because you can't really interview anyone on the spot who,
No, not at all.
just wants to use that toilet. And then on top of that, this lady, she was directed into the men's toilet, which I
Oh,
think she
no.
mentioned. Yeah, she mentioned that she was a lady and that I'm a woman, I shouldn't be in this man toilet or something like that. It was, but it was pretty bad that this person got put through so much embarrassment. And this company, it's a large company. They're probably going to be very embarrassed now because big companies, they like to promote equality and all that. And it just takes one employee who's uneducated about this kind of stuff to then ruin the image for that big company. So hopefully, that person's going to put in a complaint and the company's going to say to that person, invisible disabilities exist, blah, 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 and all that. And misgendering people, that sort of thing is not really, because the thing is, you can't always tell what someone's gender is because people have either long hair, short hair, and it's all just, can't really tell unless you ask them. A lot of ladies have had short hair for so long. Like a lot of ladies, once they have kids, they feel like, oh, I don't really fancy brushing my long hair every day. I'm going to just chop it all off. So it is quite popular among the over 40, over 50. All the women in my family had really short hair. I'm the outlier with long hair. Yeah, my mum's got like 10 centimeters at most of hair. But yeah, she cut her hair because I think a lot of women, they just get fed up of maintenance of long hair. So even hair can't be used as a gender thing, but a lot of people do rely on things like hair, clothes. I mean, we all know places like Scotland, kilt fish.
Yes,
So,
true. Yeah.
yeah, you never really know. And there seems to be this weird belief with kilts that men don't wear underwear, but I'm part Scottish and all the people I know that wore kilts did wear underwear. I don't know if that's
it's
my
probably
family.
It's probably a good thing we don't have Kim on because she'd be Googling it by now, wouldn't she?
Yeah, all the men in my family wore underwear because, gusts of wind.
Well, I mean, I'm
I guess we can cut this bit.
To all of my Scottish friends out there, I know.
Yeah, I'm only a quarter Scottish, so I can't really speak on behalf.
No, indeed. Well, that's more Scottish than I am.
Okay.
Anyway, so enough about kilts. Anything else going on this week?
Oh, Dementia Action Week. I always get told I pronounce dementia wrong. So Dementia Action Week.
I think it's dementia, isn't it?
Yeah, dementia.
We'll get letters, it's fine.
Yeah, but yeah, it's Action Week, and that's something quite close to me. I mean, emotionally, because I've been affected by that through immediate family who I've helped care for on that side. But yeah, raising awareness of, things like diagnosis pathways and, tips and tricks to help people manage dementia for themselves or for their family members and support that's out there and stuff, because it is really challenging.
Okay, I didn't know it was Dementia Awareness Week. I'll pop some links into the show notes because it's probably quite important, really, to let people know about these things, isn't it?
Yeah, apparently the population prevalence of dementia above the age of 65 is 7.1%, based on data from 2013, which equals to 1 in every 79 people for the entire UK population. 1 in every 14 of the population of age 65 or over.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot of people, and it is a very challenging one to deal with, to be honest. But yeah, I think more details can be found at Alzheimer's Society and stuff, and also the Carers Association, pretty good with people who are caring for someone with dementia, because that's what my family used. One of the members of my family signed up to become a member of that, got bought that way. But, yeah.
Okay, well, like I say, I shall pop those into the show notes. But yes, it's lovely to chat to you as always.
You too, thank you.
Thank you for joining me for a random meander about stuff.
Yeah, and thanks for doing it, even if it's just one measly human.
You are more than just a measly human.
Thank you. You too, thank you. And thank you very much. I just got a very random text asking me if I've ever been on a tandem. So that's a very random question. But yeah, thank you for the chat.
Have you ever been on a tandem?
Podcast. I have not. I'd be absolutely terrified for the well-being of the other person, and I'd probably insist they wear not only a helmet, but knee helmet, elbow helmet, ankle helmets, and full bubble wrap bodysuit as well.
I think we may need to get a cyclist on to explain to you what those things are called.
Yeah, I am a cyclist. I just I've never worn that much protective gear year before. I wear a helmet and the gel glove, and that's it. But when I have someone else to worry about, then I start
The
thinking,
full plate
ooh,
armor, yeah.
yeah, chain mail,
Oh.
bubble wrap, heavy duty bubble wrap.
Well,
Yeah.
there you have it. We are a pro bubble wrap podcast. Why, thank you, past Simon and past Marianne. That conversation was recorded on Thursday, the 19th of May, and we are now joined by returning champion Joey for today's episode. Oh, right. So, anything you fancied nattering about for a few minutes?
No.
No?
I don't know.
I'm putting you on the spot for this.
Normally a topic is provided and I'll natter about a topic, but I don't know. The sky's blue.
Well, how about dyslexia and whether or not it impacts your studying for your qualification? Does it?
Okay. Does dyslexia affect? So, obviously, I have an issue reading.
Yes.
The words, they don't so much move. People always describe it as words moving about on the page. It's not so much they move, but I can read the same line multiple times because that word is now suddenly back at the top of the page and I carry on reading. And then I've read this paragraph before because the words moved again.
Yeah, and it sort of becomes a blocker and you can't then get past that word until you've read the word again.
Yeah, it's quite frustrating. And then also, obviously, words are different in my head. Usually the worst thing is with signs when it's a word that's out of context. So it would literally just be like, I don't know, the ship shop, and I'll read it as the shit shop. But because it's on a sign, I have no context to correct it. Whereas if I see a word and I read a sentence and it doesn't make sense, I go back, I read the sentence again, I see the word that I've misread.
Yeah.
But if it's out of context on a sign, usually I'll misread, usually quite a rude word. My brain will associate a very different word and I'll have to go, and that's when I notice it because I think, well, it's obviously not a rude word on a sign. But if I misread, so I always do a crossword when I stay at Reese's because his parents do a crossword every weekend. So I do a crossword, and one of the clues was pixie.
Pixie.
But I misread it as pixel. And no matter how many times I read it, it was pixel. And it was only later that someone's like, it's very clearly fairy. The answer's fairy. And I was like, what the hell's that got to do with... Oh, pixie. But my brain had recorded it as pixel.
And so it then become...
I was never going to see it as anything else until it was forcibly shown to me that it was wrong. So that obviously can affect how I read. It does tend to slow me down. But I did, when I was young, I was very lucky that my mum picked up on it when I was little.
Yes.
I had a school teacher who called me stupid, which sent me home crying. My mother lost her mind, left me in the car, stormed back down the school drive and berated the teacher, and then came back about 20 minutes later, having just left me in the car by myself. I'm sure she was
having met your mum, I can imagine this. So,
I'm sure we were supposed to go pick up both my brothers afterwards from the school around the corner. So God knows how long this went on for. But subsequently, that teacher actually retrained, became the special needs and dyslexia teacher, built an entire department around it at the school, and I worked with her, well, essentially almost every day. But on a Thursday, I would actually have no break because my lunchtime and my morning break would be taken up with doing extra work.
Yeah.
I did a lot of extra work on it. And it's not something that I think it catches me out still.
Yes.
But when I talk to people who haven't had that level of effort put into their dyslexia, having a very good program around them, I notice the complete inability to deal with it. There's a couple of people at work who are dyslexic, and it's real bugbear of theirs. Whereas I'm not negatively affected by it. Really, it obviously does affect me, but it's not to such a degree. God damn, the dyslexia struck again. Normally laugh it off.
So you've sort of developed sort of techniques for managing it and sort of getting by with it, and you don't allow it to sort of impact your day-to-day?
No, not in any way, shape or form, really. But that, again, I know that I'm very lucky that I went to a very, very good school and had the opportunity, and I worked from it from the age of, I would have been 7, probably.
Yeah. That's when I got my formal diagnosis of dyslexia I was 7 years old. It's one of the things which, I mean, you gave me a terrible flashback there of being told you were stupid. I had that from because I went to quite a few different schools, and so perhaps I didn't have quite as much support as I might have had if I'd stayed in one place. And I do remember on more than one occasion being made to think that basically I was just stupid because I struggled to read what was on the page or write it down. Oh, my handwriting's dreadful anyway, but I know you mentioned about how words are moving around on the page, and one of the only ways I've ever been able to describe it to people who don't have any trouble reading is the opening scenes of The Matrix, where you have the letters tumbling down the page.
Yeah.
And I say, watch that on repeat for an hour or two, just like that first 5 seconds. That's what it looks like to me when I look at a page of text that's not been set out in the right kind of way. It's just nothing stays in one place.
That's fascinating. No, I do not have that. No. So
sorry.
It's what? No, I wouldn't have even. I would have if you had asked without saying that, I would have said that's how Hollywood describes dyslexia. That's fascinating because that's not how they don't.
So it's not exactly how I see it, but it's the closest analogy I can give to somebody to explain it. So if it's not in the right. I've found it comes down to typeface and justification settings and so forth. There are things I can do to make sure that actually, if it's in the right font, it's fine. I will do what you described there. I will read the same line 3 times because it hasn't gone in properly, or I've got stuck on a word and gone, this is a really simple word. I know what this word means. What does it mean? And then my brain goes off down sort of ADHD world, and I find myself 3 hours later having researched the origin of the word the. But if I get a page of text that is in a particular font or layout or whatever, I can my eyes sort of drift across it, and it looks like the letters and words are moving around the page, like they're going up and down and side to side. It's a really bizarre thing when it happens. It doesn't happen too often now because I've got quite good at making sure everything I get is in a particular format. But it was the most bizarre thing, especially at school. A lot of textbooks were written in a sort of a font where I just couldn't read them because the letters were moving.
Okay. No, so there are certain fonts that I struggle with, but I wouldn't say it sets off anything. When I say that it moves on the page, it literally it almost as if it teleports. So it will act. So I'll be reading a word, and the only way I can describe it is as if I was to have blacked out and someone had moved the word to the top of the page or somewhere else and then turned me back on looking at a different part of the page, and then I carry on reading from that word and then realise that I'm reading the sentence that I've just read. It's literally the word has just jumped across the page. That's how it hits me when words move.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And you're currently doing some studies for your qualifications. And do you find that it comes in there when you're trying to read sort of quite technical and detailed stuff, or?
So no, but saying that what I'm doing at the moment is there's a lot of anatomy and things. So actually it's a lot of pictures. It's the big picture book, really. It's just a colouring book.
Adult colouring book.
Very expensive colouring book.
I've got my Ross and Wilson here somewhere. So
yeah, so it's not too bad. Problem I've always had with my dyslexia is I don't know how, because the only way you can talk about when you talk about dyslexia with other people is obviously you compare how you cope and how you deal with it, and the way it affects your learning. But the only thing that I would really say is that because it was such a barrier when I was younger, and we tried. So before I was diagnosed, they assumed I couldn't see properly. So an optician actually sold my parents a pair of glasses for me, even though I had perfect eyesight. So there was that. I had a coloured contact lens in one eye. I did obviously all the work on how to construct words and sentences and things, and so much work on phonics and things, and how to actually build a word and how to spell. And to the point of I probably did 3-4 times the amount of work on just constructing words and loads of different games and things to try and turn how words are formed into a game so that I could remember it and then actually be able to spell. That I think I attack every problem that way now, and I make everything into a game, and I make everything into a challenge or a problem that can be solved. And there's a million different ways of doing it, and I just try and work out the better. That's how I approach everything now. But I don't. Again,
That's
that is
interesting.
all. I think that's quite a common trope of people with dyslexia about being able to analyze. Whether that's
Well, it's also a trope for autistic people. So
because I know that I'm a very something my dad always said that I was always able to do was to be able to break down a problem into constituent parts very, very quickly and then solve it. Whereas apparently other people can't do that.
yeah, you take the impossible task, you break it down into a series of very difficult tasks, you break those down into a series of difficult tasks, and so on and so forth. And you sort of then you do all of the easy ones, and they sort of build up, and suddenly you've achieved the thing.
But even with being able to visualize how something is physically put together, so very easy for me to understand how anything works mechanically. It's just very easy for me to be able to break that down. Again, it's supposed to be a common trope of dyslexia is sort of a very good visual spatial awareness, but that might be because your words keep moving about, so you've got to be relatively good.
Got to track them across the page.
It's really bad with motorway signs. Motorway signs are the worst.
I was in to see where the turns off for things, and I suppose because they're coming up quite fast and
come quite
colours
fast
as well.
They're written in such a way that you can see them from a long way. But the number of times I misread a sign, especially if it's like a roadwork sign.
I see now. It's interesting.
I have never once been able to drive past one of those signs and go, "Oh, that's what I needed to know." Cool. It's usually like the fifth time I've driven past it, I'll have read the next line, and then I'll be like, "Oh, cool, they're closing the road tomorrow. Fantastic."
I need to come back this way. It's interesting you pick on motorways for that, because it's weird. I find motorway signs, because it's blue, I find those easier to read than A road signs, which are green.
Yes, I would say that.
When I was younger, whenever I had trouble reading something, I had this overlay, a coloured overlay, which I'd put on any piece of reading, and it was blue. And I found reading things with a blue tint was so much easier than reading them on white or even green, which was the other one they gave me.
You're colourblind, aren't you?
Yeah, I have trouble with red. Yes,
with red is because they red's your trigger.
Which, in fairness, about 10% of men, especially, it seems to be a much higher incidence in men than women, do struggle with red green. So it's the most common form.
Very common.
I mean, it's funny when we were talking about sort of the language and the processing and stuff there. I mean, I have a very slight. The problem is I'm going to talk about this now, and it will then trigger it. I have a very slight speech impediment. Yes, I stutter slightly, don't I? And it was badly triggered in 2011. I had an incident after work, which ended up with me being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And I was very lucky in that the organisation I worked for at the time had their own chief medical officer on staff and paid me to go to some pretty expensive therapy. I basically lost the ability to speak for like a year. I couldn't get a sentence out because
I can't picture. I can. Yeah. Okay.
No, say it.
I can't picture you not being able to talk. That the idea, because obviously you give off the impression that you like to do it. Not in a verbose way, but you enjoy conversing. So the idea that you would be incapable of speaking is mind blowing to me.
It was terribly isolating because I couldn't share what was going on. I couldn't talk about things, and it's not that I like to talk, but I like to be part of the conversation. So I was a thing whereby I could not do it. And certain sounds I'd get stuck on, certain words I'd get stuck on, and it was like my brain was misfiring. I'd start to say the word and then break. And so one of the things that I was taught to do was to think about words as if I was traveling down a road. I'm on my bicycle, I'm traveling down a road, and the words I want to say, I'm going across them. And the ones I can't say have become a barrier. And so I have to then go around the barrier. So going around the barrier is I've identified the word, I can see it coming up. So it's about thinking about the words I want to use before I say them. So I had to slow down my thinking. That is a really difficult thing to say because most of us just sort of speak organically. It just comes into our brain. Oh, this is the thing I want to say, I'm saying it. And you don't actually think to the end of the sentence. And I was being trained to try and think the end of the sentence before I started it. So I could identify the words which I knew would trip me up and find an alternative for them.
Are there many of them?
There's not as many anymore. I've figured out ways of being able to say them, but there are still one or two words that even now will just completely trip me up, and then I will spiral and spend 5 minutes building my brain back up again because I will have hit that roadblock, and then I'll be unable to process anything else because I'm panicking about the fact that I can't process that particular word.
Does it trigger if you just think that word, obviously now I'm making you think about the words. I do appreciate this is a triggering experience.
Audio medium, and now you're trying to make me stop being able to talk.
Oh,
This might not.
I'm just curious as to whether it's actually the process of you trying to say it that causes the issue, or whether it's other people saying it.
It's a conjoined process, so it's the cognitive and the speaking process of it.
Right,
so
yeah.
if I think about the word, I will then go, oh, hang on a minute, this is the word I can't say. How do I say this word? And then I'll become hyperfixated on that word until I can work out how to say it, and lots of the time I can't. If other people say it, I can process it. I know what that word is, but then I will normally blank it again and go, what's that word? Hang on a minute. What? Wait, no. How did they say it? And so that feeds into an ADHD thing of, you've said an entire thing. All the words went in. None of them struck home. They went straight through. And so I will sometimes just ask people to say things again, not because I wasn't listening, not because I didn't hear them, but because I couldn't process the words. They didn't exist. I knew they were there. I could see them, but they're like the wind. I can feel it. I can see its impact on the world, but I can't see it. So yeah, anyway, so I had this therapy and so forth. I can now talk again, which is why apparently I'm running a podcast. So, there you go. No, dyslexia is an odd one. I mean, when I left that last job and became an apprentice with my current organization, I said, oh, by the way, I'm, dyslexic. Can I have extra time for exams, please? And did an updated assessment and so forth. And it's interesting looking at, so I've had 3 formal assessments of dyslexia over my life. I had one when I was 7. I had one when I was at college when I was 16. And I had one when I was, when I started my apprenticeship. And I managed to get hold of both the college one and my childhood one. And looking at how the assessments have changed over the years is quite good. I think they've actually improved massively. And the understanding of dyslexia in the community and society has massively changed and improved, I think. Even in the 90s, if you were dyslexic, a lot of people just sort of treated you as lazy or stupid. Whereas now it's very much recognised and understood, and you get a lot more help, generally speaking.
Not calling us sinister,
It's only because you're left-handed.
Left-handed, yeah, which is a weird trope. I've just read the common symptoms. I'm being triggered by my childhood now. So obviously, problems learning names and letters of sounds. So I don't think I had too much spelling that's unpredictable and inconsistent is a huge issue I have. Where especially if I don't think about the word, I can spell it. But the moment if someone asks me how to spell a word, can't do it because I've thought too much. I've doubted myself for just a second. It's gone. And there are words that I see every day and won't have an issue spelling 20 minutes later. Confusion over the letters looking similar. So B's and D's I used to get wrong all the time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The only way I was ever able to remember it, and it's stuck with me to this day, is spelling the word bed. Because if you join the letters up, it actually it looks like a bed if you spell bed without a gap.
It does, doesn't it? Yes.
It does. And that's the way in which I remember because of the headboards. Bed. That's the only way I can remember how to do bed. It's now so ingrained in my head I don't have to think about it, but that's how that's the only way when I was little I could do it. Orders of letters in words is quite common, which is why words misreading signs and things. Reading aloud, I used to be very slow, but I've got much better at that, and I thought I was still really bad at it until I did a scripted murder evening where we had to read from a script. And everyone else seemed to be really struggling with reading aloud and playing the character. And I was just like, I was like, oh, I've obviously got a lot better at this than I thought I was, which is quite validating, really, when it's something you struggled on for so long.
When you were at school, did they in like English class and so forth? If you were reading a book, did you have to do the reading aloud from the book part of it?
Yes.
Oh God, that always terrified me. I used to avoid it wherever possible.
I used to dread. I'd much rather we'd gone home, read the entire book, and then come back and talked about it instead of reading it one word at a time, 2 pages a lesson. You're like, oh. But yeah, there was always the people who could read beautifully and solidly, whereas you're going, the cat was very sad that its mouse got away.
Oh, I would read them out of sequence. So I'd read the sentence and then like one word I'd read before the word that was actually preceding it, and then it would confuse matters entirely. And I'd go, hang on a minute, it doesn't make sense.
It's always pronunciation that was the scarier thing. I'd be terrified of not being able to say the word. Carrying out a sequence of directions is one that I didn't think about, but I do struggle. If you verbally said, right, do this, and this, I'd have to write it down. I wouldn't be able to record
short-term memory and processing. Yeah,
I'd be able to do the first 2 and then I'd forget. It'd have to be written down. Slow writing speed, poor handwriting. Problems copying written language and taking longer than normal to complete written work. Definitely. Like it takes me a very long time to make notes. Really, it's still, that's something I struggle with even with the course I'm doing now. Because the best way that I learn, because it's how I learned at school, is that you copy it down, reread it, copy it down, reread it, make your own version of it. And that's the best way in which things stick in my head. But it takes me so long. It's such a chore.
See, this is the thing about this podcast. It's effectively primal scream therapy for us. So it's going to go over all our childhood traumas now.
But generally, I would suggest that it's as much of a disadvantage as that it gives you. I do think it does give you quite a few good advantages in terms of the way in which you process information differently. I mean, I think it can be said with anyone on the spectrum where they've had a difficulty that they've had to overcome. Therefore, they've developed coping techniques. And as long as the thing they're trying to overcome is not so debilitating that it's negative in their everyday life, it's usually giving you a mechanism that is very useful in other parts of your life.
Yes, I think that applies across, especially the neurodiverse spectrum. And indeed, I think probably most atypical people, is because you have constantly had to do battle with a world that is not built for you. You develop systems and tools that enable you to deal with things which can give you an advantage to, what's that hoary old chestnut? Thinking outside the box. Coming up with different ways of looking at things. Makes you more, I suppose, a critical thinker.
Yeah, so I've literally just Googled the many strengths of dyslexia. Top 10. So strong memory for stories and things. So being able to recall facts, apparently, which I would say, yeah.
I don't know what you mean.
People's inability to recall a story accurately drives me mad. Whereas I'd be able to tell you what colour shirt they were wearing at the time and what day of the week it was, and people then adding, they were carrying an axe. Like, carrying an axe? What kind of mad person? Excellent puzzle solving.
Why did they have an axe?
Excellent puzzle solving skills, which is what I mentioned earlier. Again, generally, rather than being a sequential thinker from going from one idea to the next, dyslexics thrive in environments that allow them to foster simultaneous thinking, apparently.
Okay.
Spatial reasoning. Oh, good. Oh, thank God. I understand my own syndromes. Thank you. Yes. Things I've already mentioned. Great conversationalists, apparently. Go us.
Oh, I don't know about that. Anyone who's listened to me for 5 minutes would question that one for sure.
With very good empathizers.
I'm an exceptionally good empathizer. You need to listen to our conversation on empathy.
I have.
Other people may not have done. I'm plugging my own podcast on my. This doesn't work, does it?
Plugging your own podcast to people who are on your own podcast. It's you're hitting the wrong audience here, Simon. I've already bought the soup. You don't need to sell me the soup.
Feeding you the
I'm
flavor
making
aid.
the soup, for God's sake.
Hungry now. Sorry,
wonderfully imaginative, abstract thinkers, thinking outside the box, as you said. And
I don't really get the imagination thing. I'm really bad at imagining stuff.
Maybe that's is that an autistic trait?
I don't know. I'm very, very good at spatial reasoning. I know that, and whenever I get a concept that I don't entirely understand, it almost becomes like a 3D model in my brain, and I can turn it around and move it and look at it in different ways. Yeah.
Because I've always been very good. So one of the standard IQ tests is that the shape made out of different blocks. And then it says, if you were to rotate this 180 degrees, which one of these pictures is correct? Very, very easy for dyslexic people to be able to do, which generally means that dyslexic people on the spatial reasoning parts of IQ tests do exceptionally well, which is why dyslexic people generally tend to be considered having quite high IQs, because all the things that are considered on that, especially the old standardized test, there was a lot of spatial and verbal reasoning and that sort of thing, which is something that dyslexic people are very, very, very good at.
Yeah, having a spiky profile, I believe, is the term.
Apparently, we can astutely analyze stories that we're told and read to them. So we can break shit down and be like, having really good ideas of how plots are intertwined and that sort of thing. Being able to guess the twist.
Yeah, so being able to conjecture based on the information.
Wow, this has been fascinating. I've learned stuff about myself. Isn't that nice?
It's always nice to sort of learn things about yourself and be able to reflect.
This is going to sound mad. So I have a minor bit of imposter syndrome with my own dyslexia. Because there are times where I don't think I'm dyslexic because it's not something that I struggle with to the degree that other people struggle with it. But then obviously things happen, and obviously having just read all the things that I've just read, it's like, no, I still have all those problems.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've constructed a world that I live in where I don't have to, I either don't have those problems, I don't have to deal with those problems, or I've got a way over them. So they're not problems. It's sort of if you construct a world for everyone in a wheelchair, then the person in a wheelchair isn't really disabled because there's nothing stopping them from doing anything. That sort of train of thought. I'm not really dyslexic because I've built a world where it doesn't affect me. But that's because I have a very physical job where I don't have to do lots of writing. I don't have to draft reports and things on a daily basis. I think if I worked in an industry where, for those who don't know, I'm a fitness instructor, so I shout at people for a living. It's lovely. But I don't. I would imagine I would struggle with my dyslexia considerably more if I had to continually reading documents and putting stuff together and that sort of thing. But the world I live in isn't, because that's
helpful.
So maybe that feeds into why I don't feel dyslexic sometimes.
Probably. I mean, you're not faced with it every day in work. It means, I suppose, that it's not something that is constantly in front of your mind.
But then also when confronted with something that I think should be an issue for me, and it's not, that's when it really starts to hit home. It's like, am I actually dyslexic? Have I just been wrongly diagnosed by all these psychologists? Of all these professionals who have spent years learning about it, got it wrong, and actually I'm right in me thinking, no, you're not dyslexic. They're just idiots, and you're fine. It's all good. I don't know. There you go. My small bit of madness regarding my own. It's
a level of imposter syndrome, and it's one of those things that we all feel about our own skills. We tend to worry. Yes, it's an interesting one, I think. I can't remember the statistic now. Is it something like 5% or more of the population is probably dyslexic, whereas it's about 1 to 2% are autistic. But there is a huge overlap between the two. People who are autistic are much more likely to also have comorbidity of dyslexia. I don't know if it works the other way around. I don't know if by being
20%.
Is it 20%?
20% of the population, I reckon.
Wow, that's significantly more than I thought. So if you think you might be dyslexic, the British Dyslexia Association is always worth having a conversation with.
80 to 90% of all those with some form of learning difficulty will also have dyslexia.
I'm sure there must be a brain-related reason for this. Maybe we need to get somebody on who understands this in greater depth.
Yes, that would be sensible.
I need to find a neurologist now.
Can smart people be dyslexic? That's a question. It just popped up on Google.
Albert Einstein was dyslexic. There you go.
As was Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and quite a few other quite polymath type people generally.
A lot of artists are.
Yeah, it's a visual part of the brain that is either it's not so badly, it's not so affected, so it's the skill you use more because it's not affected in the way that the words, or it's one of those things. Is it the dyslexia makes me more creative, or is it because it's the uninhibited part of my brain, so I've used it more, therefore it's better? Or is it both? I don't know. But yeah, very common trope of dyslexic people to be left-handed and also to be very, very, very creative and artsy.
Okay, I'm absolutely not artistic in the least. So it's a common trope for some, but not for all. I had to have help with the logo for this podcast. I wonder, and it's just a stylized A. It's not a complex thing.
It's not a complex. It's stylized A. I do wonder where the Venn diagram of your autism and the Venn diagram of your dyslexia, how much one either inhibits the other or benefits the other. It'd be fascinating to wonder how, because obviously there are plenty of autistic artists. So then the problem is when you have any form of syndrome, you start trying to equate everything to it, even if it's completely unrelated. You're like, well, it must be because I'm autistic, or it must be because I'm dyslexic. No, it's just because you're good at it or you're bad at it, and it has nothing to do with either of those things.
No, I've decided everything I'm bad at, I'm blaming on my various.
It's not my personality. It's because of this thing.
It's my brain, damn it. Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me for that. Obviously, as you heard earlier on, we talked briefly about that update on vaccine safety. And so if you've not had your third COVID vaccine, have it.
I tried to book my booster the other day because it's 6 months.
Yes, if you are offered a vaccine and you haven't had one yet, have it.
Yes,
I'm sure at some point we'll cover the whole Andrew Wakefield MMR debacle, but I will definitely need to get somebody more intelligent than me on to talk about that one. So I think I know somebody. Right, no, thank you so very much indeed for joining me today, Joey.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.